All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Brandon Figliolino, and I am the Senior Specialist for Community Engagement here at the Regional Transportation District. I am joined by my colleagues today, and we are going to be providing you an update on the Colorado 119 Bus Rapid Transit Project. So just a little overview for this evening. We're going to be discussing a project overview, giving you a little bit of information about why we're undertaking this project and what that entails. We'll share with you our proposed timelines, some route patterns that are proposed, our proposed scheduling for the bus rapid transit routes, and talk briefly about our stakeholder engagement process as well as the next steps. So I will now pass it on to my colleague, Brian. And if you will just let me know when you are ready for me to hit the next slide, I will do so.
Absolutely. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. And since Danny is the only attendee that we have so far, and I know Danny and he knows me, if it's okay with you, Brandon, I'll keep it a little looser. Danny, if you have any questions, just go ahead and ask them or raise your hand anytime during the presentation. So the PEL study, the Planning and Environmental Linkages study, kind of kicked off this whole project. That was back in 2017 through 2019, and it identified two main patterns for the proposed bus rapid transit. The blue route, which would replace the current Bolt, and the orange that would replace the former Route J, which has been suspended since the pandemic began. Now, there are two projects that comprise the BRT. One is the CDOT project that is called the Safety and Mobility Project. That one runs from Foothills Parkway at the north end of Boulder up to Hover Street in Longmont. And that Safety and Mobility Project also includes a bikeway, multimodal corridor that we'll talk about a little bit later. The RTD project extends beyond that central CDOT project and extends from the East Campus on CU and the downtown Boulder Station. And up on the north end, it ends at a proposed park and ride at Highway 66 and 287. There are also a couple of related projects that fit into the bus rapid transit. One is a Kaufman busway, which is proposed bus lanes and new stations along Kaufman between 1st and 9th, and the Longmont station at 1st and Main, which will be a bus transfer facility and a future rail station when the North Line extends to Longmont. Next slide. So the CDOT Safety and Mobility Project, we have a map of it here, again from Foothills Parkway in Boulder up to Hover Street in Longmont. This includes bus rapid transit lanes, Q bypass lanes that we'll see a picture of here in a few slides. We have transit stations at 63rd, Highway 52 and Niwot, and park and rides at 63rd and Niwot. The existing park and ride at Niwot will be expanded. In addition, there are roadway improvements planned. Nope, it's jumping around. Roadway improvements planned. There'll be new signage, striping, lighting at the intersections. The traffic signals will be replaced. Timing will be adjusted. In fact, there is a separate project that focuses primarily on the signals that's already functioning along the diagonal. And a couple of intersection reconfigurations. The one at Highway 52 at IBM will be completely refigured, and there will be some modifications to the intersection at Airport Road as well. Next slide. I mentioned earlier the bikeway project. That will be a 12-foot multimodal bikeway, for the most part in the median between the northbound and southbound lanes. Again, all the way from Foothills up to Hover in Longmont. It'll provide a direct connection to all of the transit platforms and park and rides at 63rd, Highway 52 and Niwot. The entire path will be ADA accessible, and e-bikes will be allowed on this new path. Next slide. The Q bypass lanes that we I mentioned earlier, you can see that here in the red. This will allow buses to bypass any stopped traffic at a red light, and they'll be able to proceed on up to the transit platform, pick up passengers. And in some locations, they will have their own dedicated transit signal that will then let them go ahead and get in front of that stopped traffic at the red light. There is a video on the website that I would encourage you to check out to get some more information about it. Unfortunately, we've been having problems with that video working from this presentation, so we won't look at it here, but it is on our website for the project. Next slide. So what is bus rapid transit? Well, basically, it's higher quality, more frequent, faster bus service that's intended to function more like rail than a standard bus route. The queue bypass lanes that I mentioned, along with fewer stops, means that it's faster. Um, the traffic signal that I mentioned, the transit priority signal is another one. There will be sensors on the bus that communicate with the signal controllers at the intersection so that the traffic signal will change to help speed up the bus, whether it's an extended green or cut off the red signal earlier. Next slide. So when is all of this going to happen? Well, we have some timelines that we can look at. Next slide. First off, we have the Safety and Mobility Project. Again, that's the central project between Foothills and Hover in Longmont. As you can see here, we've already been through preliminary design, and right now we are in the middle of trying to procure a construction manager, general contractor. That's the CMGC that you see there. We're hoping to have the construction manager on board later this year. And the construction manager will then help us finalize the design, put together the first construction package, which should be finished by the end of this year, and hopefully begin construction about the end of first quarter of next year. So the next slide will show us a little bit about what a construction manager is. On the left side, we have the traditional design bid build process, where the owner essentially hires a designer. The designer puts together the plans for the project, finalizes the design. That design is then put out for bid by contractors. The contractor is selected usually by the lowest price, and then the contractor builds the entire project. On the right is a design build scheme where the owner contracts with a design build team, where you have the designer and the contractor working together on the design from the beginning. And this is a little more fluid than the traditional design bid build. The design can fluctuate, and they can start building before the design is complete. Well, then in the middle, we have the CMGC, which is where this project is going. The owner hires a designer, and the design is completed to maybe a 30% level. And then a construction manager is brought on board to help finalize the design, look for areas of value engineering where money can be saved. Maybe we can find funds to build more parts of the project. And that's the route that this project is going. And once the design is complete with the construction manager, they are then given the ability to bid on the project to build it. If their bid fits within the budget, then they are hired to build the project. Otherwise, the design is bid out as it normally would be under design bid build, and other contractors can bid on the project. Next slide. So at the top with the green boxes, you see the timeline for the Safety and Mobility Project. Just below that in blue is the timeline for RTD's portion of the project beyond that central corridor. So again, we've already completed preliminary design. We'll be moving into final design once the construction manager is on board. That design should finish up early next year. And then the hope would be that construction would begin in the third quarter of 2024. And all of the elements should be complete in the first quarter of 2026. We want everything to be operational at the same time, whether it's in the central corridor, our bus stops in Boulder, our park and ride up in Longmont. We want everything to be operational at the same time in the first quarter of 2026. For public engagement, I'll pass that back to Brandon and he can talk about that timeline.
Excellent. So thank you so much. So as you can see, in 2020, we had the planning and design public outreach phase. And then during that time, we also had stakeholder and subcommittee meetings and public presentations, as well as a public survey. And now we are in the public presentations, this being one of them, just sharing updates. And in 2024, we'll be doing some additional general public outreach once the project has moved on a little bit further. And then in 2025, we will have even further ones. And so now I will pass it on to service development to talk about the service development schedule.
Good evening, Greg Filkin, service scheduling planner for the North team. Currently, we spent the last year preliminary survey with CU as far as what their needs would be is for the two lines, the blue line and the orange line. Late last year, we created a draft schedule. We are currently having our public meeting number 1. We have been trying to implement a phasing of the blue and the orange routing, and we keep getting it pushed back each run board. Tentatively, as of now, we're going to shoot for Q1 January run board of 2024, and then spend 2024, 2025 each run board, analyzing what service is working, what adjustments might need to be changed, whether that be terminals, routing, and then as we get into 2026, hopefully first quarter in the official opening, we will have completed our phasing in and our full go on full implementation of both the orange and the blue pattern. The next slide, please. Route patterns, and these are the proposed route patterns that came out of the PEL. Blue pattern, it'd be the main pattern. It would start at the proposed park and ride at Park Ridge in Maine, and that would go to downtown Boulder Station with weekday 30-minute bi-directional frequency. Saturday, Sunday holiday would be 60-minute all-day bi-directional frequency. The orange pattern would be a peak pattern. It would run from the proposed park ride at Park Ridge in Maine to the CU East Campus via Hoover Airport, Foothills, and 30th. That would be weekday bi-directional frequency, 30-minute peak frequency, and that would be offset so that during the peak times we'd be in the main trunk, we'd be running 15-minute headways. Next slide, please. The Longmont routing detail for the blue pattern. The stops and stations and locations would be Park Ridge in Maine, Maine and 21st, Maine 17th, Maine and Mountain View, 8th and Kaufman. And in the interim, while they're building that 8th and Kaufman busway, we would have Main and 6th Avenue and Main and 3rd Avenue as stops. Kaufman and 1st, which is the new Longmont station. In the interim, we would have Main and Ken Pratt and Pratt Parkway, Colorado 119 and Sunset, and Colorado 119 in Village of the Peaks Mall, Hover and Nelson, and Hover and Clover Basin, Main Street and 21st, and Main and Mountain View were not included in the original PEL and were added through stakeholder input. And next slide, please. Longmont routing for the orange pattern. Stops would include there again the Park and Ride at Park Ridge and Main, Main and 21st, Main and 17th, Hover and Mountain View, Hover and 3rd, Hover and Nelson, Airport and Nelson, Airport and Pike. There again, the Main and 21st and the Hover and 3rd were not included in the original PEL and are to be added with the Phase 1 operations. There again, that was through stakeholder input. Next slide, please. The trunk line routing for the blue pattern, stop locations are Niwot Station, Colorado 119 and Highway 52, Colorado 119 and 63rd. The trunk line routing for the orange pattern is the same. We're not going to be running any different patterns. We're not going to be skipping any stops once that's finalized on the trunk line. Next slide, please. Boulder routing for the detail for the blue pattern. Our stop locations will be Foothills and 47th, 28th and Highway 119, 28th and Valmont, 28th and Spruce, Canyon, Canyon and Folsom, Canyon and 19th, and downtown Boulder Station. The Canyon and Folsom and the Foothills and 47th were not included in the original PEL, and there's going to be added when we do Phase 1 operations. The addition of Foothills and 47th and Canyon Folsom stops would result in an additional running time of 2 to 3 minutes southbound and 1 to 2 minutes northbound per trip. Those stops were added with stakeholder input. Next slide, please. Boulder routing detail for the orange pattern. Stop locations 47th and Foothills and 47th. Boulder Junction at Depot Square. That would be on street. 30th and Arapahoe, 30th and Colorado. CU East Campus, the SEEC building. The Foothills and 47th was not included in the original PEL, and we'll be adding that when we're phasing in our operations. On this pattern, the addition of Foothills 47th stop would result in additional running time of 2 to 3 minutes southbound and 4 to 5 minutes northbound per trip, which would result in additional resource needs. There again, the Foothills and 47th was added through stakeholder input. Next slide, please. The interim stops along the diagonal highway, the trunk line, to remain basically the same as the current stops that are there. Airport and Pike, Colorado 119 and Niwot, Monarch, Highway 52 and 63rd. We will be discontinuing the use of Colorado Highway 119 and J Road due to very low ridership, and addition of the southbound 119 and Foothills Parkway. That'll occur during Phase 1, hopefully Q1 of 2024 and Q3 of 2024. Next slide, please. Scheduling. Next slide, please. The blue pattern, we're going to do weekdays, 5:30 a.m. to 12:30 a.m. It's going to be 60-minute frequency early and late. During the peak period, we'll be doing 30-minute frequency from 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Going to offset the trips from the orange pattern in the AM and PM for 15-minute headway along the trunk line shared patterns routing. Saturday will be 6:30 a.m. to 12:30 a.m. with 60-minute frequency all day. Sunday and holiday will be 6:30 a.m. to 11:30 p.m., 60-minute frequency all day. Next slide, please. Orange pattern. And this is just to kick off in the phasing. It'll be weekday 2 a.m. and 3 p.m. northbound trips and 3 a.m. and 3 p.m. southbound trips, offset with the blue pattern once again in the a.m. and p.m. for 15-minute headway along the trunk line. No Saturday, Sunday, holiday service on the orange pattern. Next slide, please. And I'm not sure, are you doing that part, Brandon? Are you doing the stakeholder engagement, or is that Jake?
I believe it is Mr. Studemeyer.
I will pass it on then.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Jake Studemeyer. I am the manager of market research here at RTD. Just going to kind of quickly go through some survey results of both our community survey that we just conducted back in March, as well as this month in April. And we're also going to go through the results from CU Boulder's survey that they did back in spring, summer of 2022. You can go ahead into the next slide. All right. And again, here we're in the public meetings, as was already said. Just going through those results, and these are they're not really preliminary results. They are complete results, but we are undergoing some further analysis as well. So this is not the final bit we're doing with all the survey data we collected. Next slide, please. Again, the survey was distributed through March and April of this year. So we started on March 17th and wrapped up the survey collection on April 8th. We received 206 surveys completed in English and 2 in Spanish. And the respondents were from the city of Boulder, city of Longmont, Boulder County. I'm sorry, those are our local stakeholder agencies that helped us distribute the survey. City of Boulder, city of Longmont, Boulder County, and CU Boulder. Next slide, please. So first, we asked our respondents to report where they currently live. The vast majority of our respondents reported living in Longmont at 63%, with 17% reporting that they lived in Boulder within the city limits and 8% in Gun Barrel. The remainder of respondents were kind of spread out across the area, unincorporated areas of Boulder County, Niwot, so on and so forth. We then asked which destination along the Colorado 119 corridor they typically travel to, and downtown Boulder was the most popular destination at 34%, followed by CU Boulder's main campus and downtown Longmont. We also asked, how currently they use the Bolt service, and 17% of our respondents reported that they ride once per week, if not more frequently, and 53% of respondents reported that they do not currently ride the Bolt at all. Next slide, please. This is just a breakout of those responses, so you can see kind of how it's broken out from that 17%. So we've got just shy of 4% reporting that they ride every day or almost every day, just shy of 9%, 2 to 4 times per week, and a little more than 4% once per week. Next slide. So out of those respondents who do ride the Bolt, we asked them, what's typically the reason that they're using that service. 42% reported that they use it to commute to or from work primarily, 34% for social trips, 14% commuting to or from a college or university, 5% for essential trips. That's things like getting groceries or medical appointments, things like that. And then other at 4% or 5%, excuse me. We then we provided the survey respondents with maps pretty similar to those that were shown previously in the presentation, just to familiarize them with the proposed orange and blue routes, and then asked which route they thought they would take the most. More than half, a little more than 55% reported that they would use the blue route the most, and just shy of 25% reporting they would use the orange route. So for those respondents who said that they were more likely to use the proposed orange route, we asked how frequently they thought they would ride, and nearly 50%, nearly 56% indicated they would ride at least once per week. Again, broken out, that would be 11% riding every day or almost every day, just shy of 29%, 2 to 4 times per week, and a little less than 16% once per week. For any respondent who reported that they would ride less than every day or almost every day, we had a follow-up question asking if there were any barriers that kind of prevented them from riding more. For these orange route respondents, the most common response here was that it does not go where they need to go. So a little less than 45% reporting that as the primary barrier to not riding it more, followed by the service times aren't frequent enough at just shy of 40%, and that traveling by public transit they feel takes too long at a little less than 37%. We did the same for those who indicated they would primarily ride the blue route. So asked them how frequently they thought they would ride it, and 41% reported they would ride at least once per week, broken out a little less than 6% for every day or almost every day, just shy of 22% for 2 to 4 times per week, and a little less than 14% for once per week. And again, similar barrier question for our blue route riders. The most common barrier here was that service times are not frequent enough, a little less than 58% there. And then two-way tie between traveling by public transit takes too long and service is not available when they need it at a little more than 41%. So knowing that a transfer may be needed from time to time in order to get to their destination, we asked respondents if they'd be willing to do a transfer in order to get where they need to go, and just shy of 46% indicated that yes, they would be willing to accept a transfer. We also had an open-ended question asking if there were other places in the area that they wanted to go or connect to that are not serviced by the proposed orange or blue routes. CU's main campus was the most common response here, but there were also several responses stating they would like it to go to Gun Barrel, to Table Mesa, downtown Longmont, and then a handful of responses reporting they'd like to go to downtown Denver. So these are the results from CU Boulder survey, again, administered last spring and summer in 2022. And they managed to get 718 completed surveys. Similar to the results we saw in our survey, about 62% reported that they currently live in Longmont. And again, asked where they primarily commute to. Just shy of 62% reported they're commuting to CU's main campus. Not surprisingly, that's okay. With just slightly more than 1/3 reporting that they're commuting to the East Campus. So we asked again to keep some consistency between the surveys. Asked if they currently use the Bolt service. Almost 38% reported that they ride or sometimes ride the Bolt. Then again, looking at the both proposed orange and blue routes, asking which station they would likely use the most, there was pretty prevalent favorite in the orange route stops over the blue. The most common response was the 30th and Colorado stop along the orange route, followed by 30th and Arapahoe and Discovery in the SEEC building, with the most popular blue station being the downtown Boulder station at 14%. So we asked how often they think they would commute along the proposed orange route. Nearly a third, so about 31%, reported that they would commute on the proposed orange route at least once per week. And again, you can see this broken out as 16%, 3 or more times per week, just shy of 15% for 1 or 2 times per week. Then we actually had a fairly sizable portion, almost 24%, saying they weren't quite sure how often they would use it just yet. We also asked if the addition of this proposed orange route would increase the probability that they would take a bus to or from campus. And 62% reported that the addition of the orange route would increase the probability that they would use a bus to commute to the CU Boulder campus.
All right, and I believe next steps is me. My camera is very dark all of a sudden. Maybe back up just one slide. Here we go. One more.
Sorry, operator error. There we
I'm gonna
go.
turn off my video. I'm not sure why my camera is so dark. So as Jake mentioned, we do have the results, but there is some more analysis to do on those results. We're currently having stakeholder meetings. We have a couple of subcommittees that are going to be meeting soon. We have a symbol/branding/naming subcommittee that should be meeting, I believe, in the end of May. We've been working with Boulder and Longmont on designing what needs to go at each of the street side stops in Boulder and Longmont, as well as picking a shelter. We're going to be having another meeting for that subcommittee soon. Earlier, we talked about moving into final design once the construction manager is on board with the safety and mobility project. And we're still working on design of the terminals, both in Boulder and Longmont at CU East Campus and up at Park Ridge in Maine, the Highway 66 and 287 near the Walmart there. Next slide. And that is the end of the presentation. If there are any questions, we'd be happy to entertain them. Gene,
Excellent.
Danny?
Oh,
No,
Gene,
Gene
go
has a
ahead.
question.
Go ahead, Gene.
Sorry about that. My volume was turned down. Thank you for this presentation. I have a question about the survey results. So it was very interesting to see where people are more inclined to want to use the service to access. And once the results are finalized, how you will be using that information.
Jake, are you able to speak to that?
I'm actually not. I feel like Natalie would probably be the best person to answer that one. I just kind of crunched the numbers.
I might be able to give a little bit of an insight on that. It's basically a guide for us to point us in the right direction. There's some things that we can control, whether that be frequencies or stops along the, in Boulder or in Longmont. We know that there's a large request to go to the main campus, but CU is planning a transit hub on their East Campus. And so that is where we've put our focus on, is East Campus with the connection to main campus via the Stampede. So yes, this survey is very important to us, and it gives us a lot of information that we can go by, but it's just a guide to point us in the right direction. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Are there any other questions before I close out the meeting for this evening? Seeing none, I thank you all for your time and I hope you have a great evening.
See ya.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank y'all so much.
Thanks.